The compact costs $649 million US dollars for infrastructure and women's SMEs. Can you explain how much is each share and what is the goal of the compact?
Sure, thank you. So we have, if I may, the Indonesia Infrastructure and Finance Compact is a total of almost $700 million, $698 million, which is comprised of two pieces. So you have a $649 million grant from MCC, I think you were referring to, and then there's also a $49 million co-investment from the government of Indonesia. Fundamentally, the compact is about trying to increase finance and for infrastructure and SMEs. Right? We're trying to improve the quality and quantity of infrastructure in Indonesia and provide that increased access to SMEs, especially those owned by women. There are 3 projects in the program. The first one focusing on infrastructure, and we're targeting 5 provinces in the country for that. So we have North Sulawesi, South Sumatra, Riau Islands, and Bali. And those are looking to do specific transport and logistics projects that would include things like ports, for example, or expanding the electric vehicle infrastructure, whether that's charging or getting more EV buses on the road, as examples of projects that we're looking at. Then we're also looking at how to get finance to those projects. And this is where, not just in those 5 provinces, but looking across the country, how to do a number of really pioneering investments that will be attractive, right, to private sectors, that we can increase their investment and their involvement in the space. And lastly, on the SME expanding finance, I recognize that there are also limitations than just finance. And so looking to provide technical assistance to potential borrowers to increase things, for example, like digital and financial literacy, to make them ready for investments when they come into their business.
And then why did you choose infrastructure, specifically in transportation?
Sure. So I think, as many folks may know, there's a vast infrastructure gap in Indonesia. Estimates of at least $1.5 trillion. And especially in an archipelago of 17,000 islands, right? Connecting people and goods to those opportunities, to markets, is a challenge. And the government of Indonesia recognizes some of those challenges around the planning, development, funding, importantly, and then implementation of those projects, and including at the provincial and then municipal levels. And so that's why we're really focused on some of the provincial and municipal areas that we've chosen to do these projects that are all critical and important projects in their own right. But I think the real goal of the program will be to create a blueprint that then these projects can be replicated in other provinces, that these projects can replicate the financing scheme that's developed and bring in additional investment, so that the legacy of our program isn't just what we're able to accomplish in our 5 years, but really what we're able to do and lay the groundwork for Indonesia going forward.
And how do you see the potential of the sector in Indonesia for the next 5 years?
Yeah, I think, well, look, the last few years, right, I think disruption, probably the simplest way to explain some of the global challenges economically. That said, Indonesia, largest economy in Southeast Asia. Post-COVID, it's grown at 5% per year, second fastest in the G20 over that time frame. But we know, and the government knows, that there are pieces of the finance sector in particular that are working at odds with Indonesia's overall economic development goals. So this is why infrastructure and MSMEs are so critical and the opportunities that are there. I spoke about the infrastructure gap, but let me give you another example. Of women in this country who turn down a job opportunity, over 1/3 of them cite constraints around transport. That's the reason that they don't take the job. And that's something that's obviously leaving a significant portion of the population on the sidelines and not being able to do that opportunities. In the SME space, which there are over 60 million MSMEs in Indonesia, right? 99% of all businesses in this country that generate well over half the GDP and employ greater than 95% of the private sector workforce. Yet they only account for a little over 21% of bank loans. Again, there's a disconnect there within the economy that our project is looking to try and bridge and really create that blueprint going forward.
Okay, since you said that the investment is actually a grant, then what is the expectation of the investment itself in the future?
Yeah, thank you. So the grant will go to an entity, right, that is implementing the program in Indonesia. So the government of Indonesia has set up the entity which is called the Millennium Challenge Account Indonesia 2, bit of a mouthful, MCAI for short. And that entity is responsible for implementing the program, right? The aspects around the grant and the financing and getting the money to the projects that we're looking to implement. And this is consistent with MCC's overall model of being country-led and country-driven. Because really the government of Indonesia is the one that's been in the driver's seat about designing the program, right? Knowing what are the constraints to economic growth that it wants to address in the program. What are the interventions that we've been talking about that will do that? And ultimately how to implement the program. And so MCC will, of course, be here in partnership and support, as I spoke about earlier, but this will really be led by Indonesians for Indonesians.
Okay, based on what you said before, you said this grant is only for high criteria country. And then what makes Indonesia in a good criteria for you? Because if we see our data for the past 3 months, it's actually not as good as before.
Yeah. So our selection process is done on an annual basis, where we evaluate all the countries that are eligible, including countries that we are already working with, and evaluating whether those countries are continuing to uphold those criteria, right, and the values that MCC wants to project. And so Indonesia has been a long-time partner. They have demonstrated that core commitment, right, to those values that I said. We publish a scorecard on an annual basis that shows countries where they rank on our 20 criteria that is publicly available, that it's based on third-party assessments. It's not on MCC's assessment of how Indonesia or any other partner country is doing.